I've driven that stretch of highway 100 times. I know every curve, every mile marker, every exit. So when I came back through at 3 a.m. and the road looked wrong, I didn't question my memory. I questioned everything else, because the gas station where I'd stopped 2 hours earlier wasn't there anymore, and the coffee I'd bought inside, it was still in my cup holder. The coffee was still warm when I passed the spot where the gas station should have been. That's the detail that broke something in my head. Not the missing building, not the rusted pumps, not the broken windows staring back at me from the dark. The coffee, still warm, in my hand. Bought inside that building 2 hours earlier from a man who smiled and said, "Safe travels," and meant it. And now the building was a shell, dead and dark and abandoned for what looked like decades. I stopped the truck on the shoulder and sat there with the engine running and the cup in my hand and tried to find a version of events that made sense. I couldn't find one. I'd been westbound on Highway 30 since 11, hauling auto parts from Cedar Rapids. Standard run, familiar road, nothing unusual until the return leg, when the world decided to stop following the rules I'd spent 40 years learning. On the way out, I'd stopped at a gas station at mile marker 141. Small place, 2 pumps, a convenience store with fluorescent lights that buzzed faintly, and a rotating hot dog machine that had no business operating at midnight, but was going anyway. The man behind the counter was maybe 60 heavyset, wearing a green vest with the station logo on the chest. He poured my coffee without being asked, the way people do when they've worked a counter long enough to read a driver coming through the door. I paid, said thanks, drove another 90 miles, made the drop, and turned around, coming back east on 30. I was watching for the station from about 2 miles out, not because I needed to stop, just habit. You clock your landmarks on a familiar road without thinking about it. Mile marker 143, 142, I slowed down, 141, the building was there. Same footprint, same position, same 2 pumps out front, but the lights were off. All of them. And as my headlights swept across the front of the building, I saw the windows, cracked, some of them gone entirely, the frames dark and empty like eye sockets. The pump covers were rusted through. The sign above the door was faded to the point where the logo was almost gone, just a ghost of color on weathered board. I pulled onto the shoulder and got out. The cold hit me immediately, sharper than the night air had any right to be, the kind of cold that finds the gaps in your jacket and pushes through. I walked to the front of the building and put my flashlight on it. The door was boarded. Not recently. The boards were gray and soft with age. The nails rusted black. Weeds had pushed up through the concrete apron in front of the pumps and grown tall enough to bend over and die and grow again. Multiple cycles of them layered on top of each other. One of the pump handles had corroded completely off its housing and lay on the ground in a nest of dead grass. This place had been closed for a long time, not 2 hours, not a season, years, many of them. I stood there with my flashlight, moving slowly across the building, and felt something shift in my chest. Not fear exactly, something quieter than fear and worse. The feeling of a certainty you've carried your whole life cracking down the middle. I took photographs, 4 of them. Front of the building, the pumps, the door, the sign. Then I got back in the truck and drove the remaining 60 miles to the depot without stopping. I didn't sleep that night. In the morning, I showed the photos to my dispatcher. He looked at them for a moment and then looked at me and said he knew that station. Said it had been a landmark on 30 for years. That it closed sometime in the late 90s, maybe 2001 at the latest. Said the owner died and no one in the family wanted to deal with the property. It had just been sitting there. I told him I'd stopped there on the way out. Bought coffee. Talked to the man behind the counter. He looked at me the way people look at you when they're deciding whether to be concerned. I pulled up the photos on my phone to show him the building again. I went to the second one, the shot of the front door, and stopped. There was something in the photo I hadn't noticed when I took it. The door was boarded, same as I remembered. But the window to the right of the door, the one I'd thought was empty, just a dark frame, wasn't completely empty. There was something just inside it. A shape, standing close to the glass, far enough back that the flashlight hadn't caught it clearly, but close enough that the outline was visible if you knew to look. The shape of a person, heavyset, standing completely still, facing out. I zoomed in until the image broke apart into pixels and tried to find another explanation. A reflection, a piece of furniture, a trick of the light bouncing off something inside the building. I couldn't find one. I've gone back over that stop 100 times in my head since then. The buzzing lights, the hot dog machine, the man in the green vest who poured my coffee without being asked. I keep coming back to one thing. When he said, "Safe travels," he didn't say it the way people say it now. Casual, automatic, barely meaning it. He said it slowly, deliberately. The way you say something to someone when you actually need them to hear it. Like a warning dressed up as kindness. Like something that knew what the road was going to show me on the way back and wanted to make sure I'd make it through anyway. I still drive that route. I still pass mile marker 141. I don't look at the building anymore, but every time I pass it in the dark, I turn the cab light on because I'd rather see everything clearly than wonder what's sitting just outside the edge of my headlights, watching me pass, the same way it watched me the first time. The coffee was still warm. That's the part that can't be explained away. Fatigue, stress, highway hypnosis, none of that puts a warm cup in your hand from a building that's been dead for 20 years. Something was in there. Something that knew how to look like a man behind a counter. That knew how to pour coffee and smile and say the right words. And when he came back, it was still there, standing at the window in the dark. Watching him figure it out, what unsettles me most isn't what he saw in that photo. It's that it let him take it. The wreck was bad enough that I slowed down without thinking. A car on its roof at the exit of a curve. Wheels still spinning, windshield shattered across the asphalt. Two paramedics climbing out of their vehicle. A man on his knees on the shoulder with his head down. A woman wrapped in a thermal blanket sitting on the guardrail. The scene had that heavy silence accidents have when the worst has already happened, and what's left is just the damage. I passed slowly, checked my mirrors, and kept going. I made the delivery in Cookville, signed the paperwork, exchanged a few words with the warehouse guy, and turned around. 2 hours, maybe a little more. The night was colder on the way back, and a light fog had settled in the low stretches of the highway, the kind that doesn't block visibility, but blurs everything just enough to make the road feel narrower than it is. I was on autopilot. Familiar route, no traffic, radio low. When I came up on the curve, I already knew what I was going to see. You clock those things without realizing it. The guardrail, the tree line, the angle of the road. My eyes went to the shoulder before I'd made a conscious decision to look. The shoulder was empty. No wreck. No glass on the road. No tire marks cutting across the lane. No flares, no cones, no sign that anything had happened there at all. Just clean asphalt and an intact guardrail and the fog sitting quietly against the tree line. I slowed down and looked again. I checked my mirrors. Nothing. I even questioned the curve itself. Wondered if I'd miscounted, if there was another curve further back that looked like this one. But I knew this road. I'd driven it 40 times. This was the spot. I told myself the cleanup crew had been fast. Told myself 2 hours was enough time to clear a scene if no one was seriously hurt. Then I saw the car. It was parked on the shoulder about 200 feet past the curve, facing the same direction I was traveling, engine running, Interior light on. A dark blue sedan. 4-door. A crack running from the bottom left corner of the rear windshield up toward the center. A distinctive crack, the kind that spreads in a specific pattern you don't forget. I had seen that crack 2 hours ago, on the same car, lying on its roof with its wheels still spinning. I pulled over behind it and sat there for a moment with my hands on the wheel. The car didn't move. The brake lights weren't on. Through the rear windshield, I could see the silhouette of someone in the driver's seat, head slightly bent, the faint glow of a phone screen lighting up their face from below. Just sitting there, completely unaware, I got out. The cold hit me and the fog muffled everything, and for a moment the only sound was my boots on the asphalt and the low idle of the car's engine. I walked up to the driver's side window slowly, the way you approach something when you're not sure what you're going to find. The driver was a man, maybe 35, dark jacket, one hand on the wheel and one hand holding his phone. He was reading something on the screen. His face was relaxed. He had no idea I was standing there. I raised my hand to knock on the window and stopped. I didn't know what to say. I stood there in the fog with my hand half raised and ran through every version of it in my head. Sir, I think you're going to have an accident. Sir, in about 2 hours, something is going to happen on this curve. Sir, I saw your car on its roof tonight and the paramedics were already there, and I need you to turn around and go home. None of it had a version where he believed me. None of it had a version where I didn't sound like a man who'd been driving alone too long in the dark. He looked up from his phone and saw me through the glass. His expression shifted, not scared, just startled. The look anyone gets when they realize someone is standing outside their car on a dark highway. He lowered the window an inch. He asked if everything was okay. I said yes. I said I thought I'd seen something on the road back there and wanted to make sure he was all right. He said he was fine, just checking directions. He said thanks and raised the window. I walked back to my truck and sat there watching his taillights in my mirrors. He stayed parked for another minute or two. Then he pulled back onto the highway, heading toward the curve. I sat there long after his lights disappeared. I thought about turning around and following him. I thought about calling highway patrol and trying to explain what I'd seen. I thought about a lot of things that all ended in the same place. A man looking at me from the other side of a window, deciding I wasn't a threat, and driving away anyway. I've looked up accident reports for that stretch of highway 3 times since that night. The most recent one is from 2 years ago. Dark blue sedan, single vehicle. The report lists the driver as the sole occupant, a man in his mid-30s. It lists his condition as serious but stable. It doesn't list a cause. It doesn't need to. I already know exactly where he was coming from, and I know he passed me on the shoulder that night before it happened, looking at directions he was never going to need. He had information that could have changed everything, and no language to deliver it without sounding like a man coming apart at the seams. So he knocked on the window and said everything was fine, and watched him drive toward a curve that had already decided what was going to happen there. But here's what nobody's asking. When he passed that curve on the way out, the accident hadn't happened yet. The car was already on the road, already moving, which means he drove right past him the first time without knowing. The road let him pass once in ignorance. The second time, it made sure he understood exactly what he was watching, and still couldn't stop. That's not a haunting. That's something far more deliberate than a haunting. That's a road that wanted him to see. The town was dead on the way out, not quiet, not sleeping. Dead. The kind of dead that takes decades to settle into a place, where the wood has gone gray and soft, where the windows have lost their glass, and the frames have warped outward like the buildings were exhaling one last breath and never inhaled again. A gas station with pumps so rusted they'd fused to their housings. A diner with a collapsed awning hanging over the entrance like a broken jaw. Houses with porches that had folded inward, roofs that had caved, walls leaning at angles that should have brought them down years ago, but hadn't, as if something was holding them up just enough to keep the shape of a town without any of the life. I saw all of it in about 8 seconds at 60 miles an hour. Exit 278, a short access road. And then this, a town that looked like it had been abandoned sometime in the 60s and left exactly as it was the day everyone walked out. I noted it the way you note things on a familiar road and kept going, made the delivery in Grants Pass, turned around, and headed back east on 84. The night was clear and cold, and the highway was empty in both directions. I had the radio off, just the engine and the road and the dark pressing in from both sides. Around kilometer 278, I looked left out of habit. Every hair on my body stood up simultaneously. The town was lit, not bright, not the flat wash of modern lighting. Warm, yellow, the kind of light that comes from inside a building when the bulbs are old and the shades are drawn and life is happening just behind the glass. Every window on every building on that street was glowing. The diner had its awning up, intact, a neon sign in the window throwing red light onto the sidewalk below. The gas station was open, both pumps lit. A car pulled up to one of them, a man standing beside it with his hand on the nozzle, looking down at the ground. I hit the brakes so hard, the trailer pushed forward. I sat in the middle of the highway for a full 10 seconds just looking at it. The access road was right there, the same short road I'd passed on the way out. I turned onto it without making a decision to do so. My hands just moved. The access road was smooth. No cracks, no weeds pushing through the asphalt. On the way out, I'd seen the surface was broken and overgrown. Now it was clean. I stopped the truck at the edge of the main street and looked through the windshield. People, not many, 5, maybe 6, moving on the sidewalks with the slow, purposeful movement of people going about ordinary business at night. A woman carrying something wrapped in paper coming out of a shop. 2 men standing outside the diner talking, one of them gesturing with his hand. A child sitting on a porch, step looking down at something in his lap. None of them looked at me. I rolled the window down. The air that came in was wrong immediately. Not cold, warm, carrying the smell of food and oil, and something underneath both of those that I couldn't name. A smell that felt old in a way that temperature alone doesn't explain. Like the air itself had been inside for too long. I called out. Nobody reacted. I called out louder. The man at the gas pump looked up. He was looking directly at my truck, but his expression didn't change. No curiosity, no acknowledgement. He looked at the truck, the way you look at something that isn't really there. Eyes passing over it, finding nothing to focus on, moving away. Then he looked back down at the nozzle. I got out. The moment my boots hit the ground, the child on the porch looked up from whatever was in his lap. He was maybe 8, dark hair, wearing clothes that were wrong in a way I couldn't immediately identify. The cut, the fabric, something about the collar. He looked directly at me, not through me, at me. His expression wasn't frightened or curious. It was the expression of someone who has been waiting for something unpleasant and has finally seen it arrive. He stood up slowly and went inside without taking his eyes off me. The door closed behind him. Then the woman with the paper package stopped walking. She was facing away from me, but she stopped mid-step, one foot still raised, and stood completely still on the sidewalk. The 2 men outside the diner stopped talking. The man at the gas pump didn't move. Everything stopped at exactly the same moment. The warm yellow light in every window flickered once. I got back in the truck. I don't remember making the decision. I was outside, and then I was inside with the door locked and my hands on the wheel, and the engine already running. The street in front of me was completely still. Every person frozen in place. No movement, no sound. Just the warm light pressing out through the windows, and that old, enclosed smell still coming through the open window. I rolled the window up. I reversed down the access road without looking away from the street. When my rear wheels hit the highway, I swung the truck around and drove. I didn't check the mirror for a long time. When I finally did, the exit was dark. Not the dark of a town at night. The flat, empty dark of a stretch of highway with nothing beside it. No glow, no shapes, no light of any kind. I got home at 5 in the morning and sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and searched for Kilometer 278 on Highway 84 in Oregon. I searched for the exit, for the access road, for any record of a town or settlement at that location. Nothing. Not a name, not a historical record, not a decommissioned post office or a county boundary marker. The satellite image showed the exit and the access road. Both there, both real, leading to an empty field. No structures, no foundations, no evidence that anything had ever been built there. I switched to historical maps. County surveys going back to the 30s. Railroad records. Land registry. At that location, at every point in recorded history, nothing. Whatever I drove into that night has no name. Has never had a name. Has never, according to any document I can find, existed at all. But the child on the porch saw me. He knew what I was the moment I stepped out of that truck. And the look on his face wasn't confusion. It was recognition. Like he'd seen someone from the outside world stumble in before and already knew exactly how it ended. No records, no name, no evidence it ever existed, but the access road is there. The satellite image shows it. A real road leading to an empty field that has always been an empty field. Someone built that road. And whatever is at the end of it has been there long enough that a child recognized an outsider on sight, not with fear, not with curiosity, with the quiet recognition of something that has seen this happen before and already knows how the visit ends. Think about that. Every person on that street stopped at exactly the same moment, mid-step, mid-sentence, mid-breath, like they received a signal, like something told them, he saw us. The lights went out the moment he left, which means they weren't on for the town. They were on for him. The only question worth asking isn't what that place is. It's how many drivers have taken that exit and never made it back to the highway. 3 drivers. 3 roads they knew by heart, and on the second pass, nothing was where it should have been. That's what nobody tells you about familiar roads. The familiarity isn't protection. It's exposure. You stop paying attention. You stop questioning. Your hands know the route before your eyes do, and that comfort, that specific, earned comfort of a road you've driven 100 times, is exactly what something out there is counting on, because it only shows itself on the way back, when you're tired, when your guard is down, when you've already decided nothing surprising is going to happen tonight. That's when the gas station that closed 20 years ago has its lights on. That's when the wreck you passed 2 hours ago hasn't happened yet. That's when the town that doesn't exist on any map is full of people who already know your name. These 3 drivers made it home. Not all of them do. If these case files are following you into the dark, subscribe and turn on notifications. New files go up every week. 2 more videos are on the final screen right now. Choose one. I'm Morrigan. And the next time a road feels too familiar, pay attention to what's changed, because something already has.